Good evening. How's everybody? Everybody good? All right. Well, let's get started. We'll start with looking at our weekly schedule as we normally do. Thank you for joining me this evening. Okay, let's look at our weekly schedule. So this week we're looking at cyberbullying, social media issues. I've got two really good PowerPoints, and as usual, I won't read them to you. You can read them yourself. One of them's got some really good scenarios in it that we did, I think, last summer. It was really good. And so I'll point that out later on this evening. And then um, the thing to remember about cyberbullying is this: you can't define it too narrowly. You got to go to the law. The law says if it's likely to disrupt your school environment, you got to deal with it. It doesn't matter where they were when they sent the text or email or IM or whatever. It doesn't matter what device they used. Those two things are immaterial. But I see way too many school administrators who pretend they don't have to deal with it because we can't prove where they sent it from,
On the
uh,
flip side,
or they didn't use a school computer. That has nothing to do with cyberbullying. And so let's look at that right quick. Prompts. Right here are the bullying laws, anti-bullying laws. This link is under tonight's session. How is it defined? What right here? See this piece right here? Creates or is certain to create a hostile environment by substantially interfering with or impairing a student's educational performance, opportunities, or benefits. That's what the law says. So how they did it or where they did it is immaterial if they did it. Now, I'm going to remind you, you need to have law enforcement involvement in this. They have subpoena powers. Sometimes they can get a warrant. Sometimes parents won't turn the phone over. Sometimes parents won't help. Sometimes parents are the ones that are participating. All too often, you need to get the police involved. So that's the one for this week. Make sure you look at that, look at all the laws thoroughly when you do that. Um, so now I'm going to read through all the things that caught my eye this week from your discussion board posts. Amy talked about making sure you have your referral or your documentation from your teacher. And we should also make sure our teachers are documenting parent contacts. That's easy to do with email nowadays. Really easy to do. Now, I've heard this notion that principals won't deal with a kid unless the parents made a contact. Well, sometimes there's one off, like a kid gets in a fight. Well, you couldn't have already known that was going to happen. But if it falls under the generally disruptive behavior, which is a thing, by the way, in the state manual, then there should be previous parent contacts. But have them document that. Tremaine made a good point. When you're doing a search, um, you have a much lighter standard under the law. You only have to have reasonable suspicion. Police have to have probable cause, so they can't search nearly as frequently or as easily as you can. But do not search without the police present. Let me say that again. Do not search a kid without the police present. What if you take something illegal off of them? You just can't take it into your possession. Make sure the police are there when a search is conducted. Make sure and understand that you're going to do it, but they need to be there. Carolina pointed out, and Amy pointed out, don't be careful not to define cyberbullying too narrowly. Caroline on discussion board number 10 about HR, you should read hers. She has an excellent example of how she found the right person in HR and the protocol to go through. Let me remind you, everything we do is about due process, whether it's discipline, EC, hiring, everything's about due process, substantive, procedural. Now, here's the thing to remember if you're to that discussion board. You got to ask your principal and your HR people how the process works in your district. And you say, well, Dale, it's due process. It works the same for everybody. The substance of the law is absolutely the same for everybody. It's federal hiring law, Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, EEOC. However, the procedural varies from district to district. Who does what, where, and when? Everybody does the same what, where, and why, and when. But who does it is the issue. My example is I worked in a high wealth district and I worked in a low wealth district. When I was in a low wealth district, I had to do everything. I mean, even down to run an ad in the paper. I had to do everything. Check the references, take them to get drug tested, do the background, schedule the background, everything. Call the references, everything. I went to Charlotte, didn't have to do anything. All I had to do is pick up the phone, call my HR analyst and say, send me 3 candidates. And I just had to pick one. Everything else was taken care of. Somewhere between those two is where your district lies. The substance of due process is the same everywhere. The procedure varies by district according to who does what. If you're a wealthy district that can employ a lot of people over in your HR department and you got an analyst, then man, you got it made. If you're not, then you got to do it yourself. But you've got to find out what it is in your district. You're looking for the procedural due process. Tommy pointed out that cyberbullying, even with cyberbullying, you're looking for restorative justice, try to get all the parties involved, get law enforcement involved. That's a good point again. Josh is in the other class. His administrator is going to let him train some in Power School discipline module. If yours won't let you, at least they'll let you see it. What we've been covering on discipline, it's very involved. I'd love for you to see that. Tremaine pointed out, when you're doing discipline, that you should collaborate with your peers. As Snoop would say, you better ask somebody. But that you can run reports every week out of Power School to make sure that you're being consistent. There's no excuse for not being consistent, being arbitrary at the school level, assigning discipline infractions, because you can run the reports and see how and track what you're doing. Caroline did her assessment inventory, did a good job with it. Let me remind you again on assessment inventories, simply documenting things are broken without following through and get in touch with the person in charge of that, just putting it on a piece of paper and filing it away twice a month, they'll get you for nonfeasance. You had a duty to act and didn't. Again, we go back to Uvalde, Texas. Unfortunately, they had documented for months that the doorknob was broken on that classroom. Didn't bother to go any further than that, other than put it on the list and just put it in the file. Didn't bother to call the folks over at operations or maintenance. Hey, the doorknob's fixed. When can you come get this? And that was the door that the shooter found open, went in and killed all the kids. So just simply documenting without following through. You need to know who's the person in charge. My fire extinguishers are expired. Who I better call? Kevin Earp, he works in Charlotte, used to. We'll call Kevin. I've got a door that's broke. I better call my area maintenance man. You got to follow through on these things. Emmy pointed out, it takes a lot of time to do due process. It absolutely does, but it keeps you out of the pokey. Liz pointed out that, again, there's due process for everything, and you got to remember that when you're processing discipline for EC kids, there's extra steps for them. Got to remember that. It's not the same for everybody. So if a kid came in my office and I didn't know who it was or I wasn't familiar, first thing I check is see if they're EC. It's a different process. Now, remember, if you change a kid's placement, I don't care whether it's lunch detention, I don't care whether it's in-school suspension, out of school, you get 10 days, and the 10th time you got to do the manifestation termination, functional behavior assessment, DEC 5, psychological reval, update the IEP, all those things. But remember, the third time that an EC kid does the same thing, they go to the front of the line and you start the paperwork because they're showing a pattern. Patterns are how we determine if it's part of their disability or not. So you got to remember there's some extra steps to do if they're EC kids. Jasmine, a point that I wanted to bring out, she talked about interpretation, and versus discretion. You have no discretion. Follow the law. This notion, well, I use my discretion. We handle that in house. What you meant was, is we were covering that up or didn't want to report it. Interpretation, that's when you get help if you can't interpret. But you have no discretion. Follow the law. Adam made a really good point, and I probably missed this one myself, and I should have reminded you. In due process, in procedural due process, the teacher writes the referral, gives it to the administrator. Do not, especially in writing, let them suggest any kind of punishment, because that would mean that there's a finding of guilt already before the investigation. Due process has not been served. What you need to say to teachers is, when you hand me the referral, you're out of it. Go back to your room, teach your kids. Don't even recommend anything to me. That violates due process. That means you've already found the kid guilty before you've ever heard his case. You can't do that. And teachers love to do that. Now, as you know, some of them, anything short of just taking them out back and shooting them is not enough. You're not supporting them. Your job is not to support them. Your job is to support kids. Don't let them get in the habit of trying to tell you or write down on the referral what they think they ought to have. That is not following due process at all. LaShonda pointed out, and this is any program, the need in discipline. If you're doing whatever discipline program you're doing, PBIS or discipline with dignity or whatever you're doing, that you need training so you have consistency among your classrooms. She pointed out that, her principal said, I think, had 2 teachers that filled the office full every day. Well, then there's a problem there. It may be a training problem. We'll go with that. It's a training problem. But if training doesn't fix it, it's new ox time. Glenda, you want to look at her response on procedural due process. She did a great job, involved the AP and the SRO, and she talked about the interplay and how they work together. She showed you an excellent how-to primer on how to do procedural due process for kids. Good job on that one, Glenda. Brandon talked about he's seen regular ed teachers send kids out. No kid should leave your classroom unescorted, but to make it doubly bad, we'll send them out to the EC teacher's class. The EC teacher, that violates federal law. She only has her caseload. You cannot send kids to the EC teacher's class. That's a big no-no. That one will get you fired. Kristen said MTSS works. Yeah, it does. That's why we put it in. That's why it's state law now. I like that. Randy Rutledge he's in the other class. He did an excellent MTSS review. If you want to read one short and to the point. Randy reached out to his HR people as well, and made a good point on the importance of doing your reference checks. And he added, but the best part, he added a hiring flow chart for his district that shows the procedural due process, puts it in writing. This is what everybody does. I love it. Randy Rutledge, look at his on HR on hiring on that discussion board. He's got a wonderful flow chart. Find out if your district's got one like that. It's great. Tanya did an excellent post on cyberbullying. Talked about parents and kids talk, so you've got to make sure. And in her case, they were using a school system Chromebook, but you've got to make sure that everybody understands it had nothing to do with the device or the location. It's the content of what happened. Tanya did a good job detailing an IEP meeting, was taking notes, which is smart. You should get in the habit of taking notes in IEP meetings if you're the LEA rep. You're supposed to sit there and do something besides just take up space, breathe everybody's air. You should be taking notes on everything that happened. You should be scripting IEP meetings if you're the LEA rep. And she's put a really good example in the discussion board 7 on the IEP meeting on how to script an IEP meeting. You're supposed to do that as the LEA rep. Now, I know a lot of people don't, but it's all fun and games until somebody gets their eye put out and somebody wants to know what went on and you don't have a clue because you were daydreaming or thinking about something else. You're supposed to script those IEP meetings if you're the LEA rep. Glenda pointed out that a lot of that you need reward systems and discipline. They go along with the punishment. That can get overwhelming, though. That's one of those. That's a cautionary tale, but a lot of people try to do that. Um, Alicia had a real good post on cyberbullying that her principal picked up on some online chatter. Was proactive. Um, some awareness on Bamberg fights, one of these sites where people just get in the fights, and then it kind of got spread around. And so the principal was proactive, trying to deal with that, understanding what that was going to bring to the school. Jeffrey talked to his principal. And what I love about this is remembering that intervention is a school-based committee, and you have to keep up the head count on MTSS. Just like the EC people have to keep up head count, you have to worry about it, but you have to keep up the head count when you're doing MTSS. It's very, very important. That's a school-based committee. That's your baby. All right.
Dr. Lamb?
Yes, ma'am.
This is Tanya. I didn't put this in my IEP, but my assistant principal, said that she tries to not even take her phone with her
You should.
because she feels that she needs to be focused, one, and that the parents are giving up their hour or hour and a half to come, and she feels like if I'm doing something and they see that I'm not invested
That's right.
in
In their
and don't
child.
think that their child's not important. So
That's
I didn't
exactly
write
what
that
you're
down.
saying. And so you need to get in the habit when you do IAP, when you do LEA rep, and you will because you'll be the lowest person on the totem pole. You need to understand. You need to take a yellow legal pad and you need to script the whole thing, just like you're scripting a lesson. For those of you who have done peer reviews or who have done NESA's evaluation, it's back to the old school. Back when I first started doing teacher observations, got to script them. You are there as the district's representative. You're supposed to be engaged. You're supposed to know what's going on. You're supposed to be able to, if there's ever an issue, something comes back, you're supposed to be able to address it because you're supposed to be taking notes.
Oh, I'm looking for it.
So that's what you need to be making sure that you do.
I'm looking for the thing.
All right. All right. So, first thing I want to cover tonight is your case study for next week. The Leandro case is 30 years old, was this past year. Full disclosure, I was on the losing side. The plaintiffs lost. I worked for worked out of the Institute for Government Chapel Hill that was doing the legal work to help the plaintiffs on that one. And so the first thing that you've got to know about Leandro is the plaintiffs lost. And now everybody's going to say, but they said they had to give them. They've never given them any money, and the General Assembly refuses to give them money. I've got a couple of articles pulled up, and I'll drop the links in. The lawsuit was to change the funding formula on state money, how it's allotted to schools, school district students. So let's review that quickly. How does money come? Money comes from the state on a per pupil basis on average daily attendance. They give now 8. Then they were given $7,000 a pupil. It came to the central office and, based on average daily attendance. And so now remember, it didn't come $7,000 at one time. It came $700 10 times minus the absenteeism. That's how it came. Now, here was the issue. Low wealth districts were then and are now hand to mouth overburdened with their own facilities. What happened in 1966? North and South Carolina got out of school funding, building and maintaining buildings. So whose responsibility is it to build and maintain the facilities that kids go to school in? It's the local education agencies or the school districts. Now, they can't tax School boards in North and South Carolina are unempowered. So when the school board every spring works through and develops their budget for the following year, they can't fund it. They have to go to the county commissioners hat in hand and ask for the money to do that. And they have to keep their facilities up first, and the county commissioners have all these other things that they've got to fund, including community colleges in everybody's county, an area career centers in South Carolina that everybody's got to fund. And so the low wealth districts, because the money, the revenue that funds schools comes from business tax and property tax. What if you're in a low wealth area where there isn't a lot of business? What if there's a lot of farms or rural land that's not very valuable and they've got what they call farmstead exemptions, which means they only pay a small property tax on their acreage? A lot of that's still around. And there's no businesses, and even if there are houses, they aren't worth very much, not very big tax base. And so schools districts struggle to keep their buildings up, buy them and keep them up. And so when the state gave at that time, and still the same today, when the state gives their $7,000, that's all the money that goes toward educating the child, because the rest of the money is trying to keep a roof over their head. Now, 7,000, 1993. At that time, Charlotte Mecklenburg was adding an additional $4,000 per pupil just in education, buying extra teachers, instructional materials, supplies, anything you want. We were lighting our cigars with $100 bills. We were just wasting money. And so the lawsuit was 5 low wealth districts got together and said, wait a minute. The inequity here is in the funding formula. We want to get away from flat grant funding. Some kids cost more to educate than others in low wealth areas. What we want you to do is we want the state to do a district power equalizing. So in the high wealth district, you only give them 5,000, and they'll add their 4 to it, and now they'll have 9,000. And that 2,000 that you didn't give them, you give us that, and we'll have 9,000. So in the end, everybody will be even across the board. In the end, not at the start, but at the end. It's just like, your personal finances is, your money on hand is not the first of the month when you just got paid. It's at the end of the month. That's what they were talking about is, yeah, they start out even, but Charlotte Mecklenburg adds, we want them to be even in the end. Leandro plaintiffs lost. The state did not change the funding formula. They said, but we got a deal for you. We're going to give you some capital money to help you with those, defray those capital expenses. And we're going to get it from the education lottery. No money has ever come from the lottery. What little bit of money has come has just been wasted on pork barrel, like building a NASCAR Institute in Mooresville, which is of zero value to anybody. Or what was it, the county somewhere up along the Virginia border, Stokes or Surrey, if I'm insulting you, I intended to, weren't smart enough to figure out how to do 2 lunch shifts. And we got to build a cafeteria so we can get all 300 of our kids in at one time. They only had 300 kids in the high school and couldn't figure out how to run 2 lunch shifts. And of course, as soon as they built it, they closed the school. I mean, it was just what little money has come. So only about 7 cents on a dollar actually comes out of the lottery. By the time you pay the winners, the company that administrates it, you pay the advertising, that idiot that comes on once a month with that sign, Tuesday, 2 for Tuesday lottery, whatever that nitwit they have on advertising. All that stuff costs money. And so no money's coming to schools. We're no better off than we were, but you've got to understand this is what the lawsuit held. That's the finding. So let me share that with you. And now we're going to apply that. Let's see did I pull it up? Yeah. All right, so here's what they held. A unanimous court stated that neither school districts nor counties have any constitutional right to equal funding. That means they lost. That was the whole case right there. We want equal funding at the end. Take some from them and give it to us. So when they add their money at the end, we're equal. And they said, you have no right to that. You only have a right to a basic education. Well, what is that? What we say it is. Every how much money we give you, that's what a sound basic education is. And so, but here's the part that's relevant to our case. Of equal significance, Supreme Court ruled the state of North Carolina, not local school district, has the ultimate constitutional obligation to actively safeguard and successfully deliver every child's Leandro right. No exceptions, no excuses. What that means is the state will not regulate or move or change the money, and neither can the local district. Neither can the local district. All right, so let's do a quick review then. Can you move federal money? Can you spend it on anything other than what it's intended for? Absolutely not. It tracks the kid, doesn't it? All right. Now, knowing the law, can you move state money? That's supposed to go to that $7,000 the kids enrolled in that building. Can you take 3,000 of that and put over here to this school for these kids that are tougher to educate? No. What about local money? Remember, you do not fund your own budget. When the county commissioners approves your budget, it had to be line item. Can you move any of that money around after they give it to you or approve it? Absolutely not. You are not the funding authority. You do not have the authority to move any of that money, local money. And you say, well, what we'll do is we'll get the county commissioners we'll put it in the budget. We're going to do this before we start. They won't do that. They know it's illegal. It's against the law to move state money around or even local money. So they're not going to do that. And you say, well, what about discretionary money? Well, I'll give you two examples of discretionary money. Superintendents do have discretionary money. And so in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, they used it to do the high school challenge after Judge Manning said what was going on in our high schools back in the 90s was genocide. And it was such a big political football. It was $3 million. Sounds like a lot of money to me. Understanding it was less than 1/10 of 1% of the budget. The budget back at that time was $1.6 million, $1.6 billion. And these five Republicans got together and ran as a block, called themselves the Gang of Five, like $3 million was all the money in the world. And they got elected so that they could take that money back. So county commissioners will never, that's an abject lesson. County commissioners will never again attempt to allot some money to low wealth high schools ever again in the state of North Carolina after what happened in Charlotte. Those five people lost their seats immediately. They acted like $3 million was all the money in the world. And so that's never going to happen ever again, especially now that we have district races. How would it play in my district? I'm in District 1 in Mecklenburg County, the very top. How would it play when I said, you know, we're really wealthy up here in Davidson, Cornelius, Lake Norman, and we are really wealthy, stupid money. We could do with a little bit less. Let's give some to some of those inner city kids. And I'm the county commissioner that had to go out and try to get votes on that. Not going to happen. You know, rich people are the greediest people in the world. And so I can't support, you know, if I'm a District 1 rep giving more money to the District 4 schools than our schools, that would not be a smart thing. And so federal law, state law, local law, all of those things says you can't move the money. Now, superintendent in 2020, the superintendent in Chapel Hill, Carrboro tried that. You know, there's always somebody thinks they're smarter than everybody else. And so, you know, Chapel Hill, Carrboro, it's in Orange County. Chapel Hill, Carrboro School District, you know, the Chapel Hill side is wealthy, white, and affluent. The Carrboro side isn't. And so the superintendent was trying to get some money to the Carrboro side. Unfortunately, she had a retired principal on the Chapel Hill side who had a granddaughter in school and knew what she's doing was illegal. She took her discretionary money, knew she couldn't hire teachers or do any of that with it because that would be, you know. And so what she did was she hired a consultant group who brought extra teachers and support in and did a contract with them for $89,999, $1 less than she'd had to have board approval to spend. But she did an ongoing contract for over $1 million, which was illegal. So they fired the CFO, the chief financial officer, immediately. And then they let the superintendent go on sick leave for a week until she could, and then they fired her. Baldwin was her name. You can Google it. I've got a copy of it. But this happened in modern times in this decade, where a principal or a superintendent said, "I don't have to follow the law. I'll use discretionary money to beat the Leandro law," and Leandro says, "Don't do it." That the state has no constitutional right and bans local districts from trying to do it to regulate the money. Now, in the case for next week, the superintendent did a little pilot program last year in 4 schools. He used local money. That's what we're talking about. But they shouldn't have let him do that, because that's the end of it. It can't continue because it violates all 3 sets of laws. Now, you say, "Well, Dale, we're not trained to be superintendents yet." This is an example of, we start at the top, federal law, state law. We start with the superintendent and come down. And the notion here is, as a principal, you can't mix money. You can't spend money on something else. I don't care how good your heart is and how beneficial or what a good cause it was. You can't mix money together. You can't take money from one stream and put it in another. It goes all the way to the top. That's the point of this case study, is it goes all the way to the top. It's not just you that are bound by these rules. You can't go to the superintendent and say, "I know I can't, but how about you doing this for my school?" You can't. He can't. She can't. Every funding stream has separate, and it's earmarked for a certain thing, and that's the only thing you can spend it on. While it might be a wonderful idea and a humanitarian thing to try to get more support and effort to low wealth kids and kids at risk, the law says you can't do it. You got to understand that. So don't come in next week and say they won. They're gonna get them some money. They've not gotten any money. The General Assembly still refuses to give them any money. Judge Manning and Judge Lee said you're billions behind on what you owe these people, but they're not going to give it. So here's a couple of articles and one of them, let me go here on Leandro. I can close that and that. Okay. I can close that one. On November 4th, 2022, the North Carolina Supreme Court issued a ruling that the legislature must fund 2 and 3 of the comprehensive years 2 and 3 of the remedial plan. Days later, election shifted the composition of the Supreme Court from a 4-3 Democratic majority to a 5-2 Republican majority. Immediately, Senate President Phil Berger and House Speaker Tim Moore filed a suit to block the order to fund to give low wealth districts any money. And they still haven't. And they just said, "Nanny, nanny, boo, boo." I watch it every week. They're on TV. I've got a link to legislative sessions. I watch DPI and school board every Friday morning. It's like I've seen comedy shows not as funny as that bunch. But the one thing I will have to say about them, right here it is. And this is one of them, and then the other one is kind of but in the end, no money has ever come. No money will ever come. Elections have consequences. I don't understand why people vote against their own benefit, but they do. But the one thing that I will say about those 2 gentlemen is that I appreciate about them, Berger and Moore, is they say it out loud. They don't pretend to be anything other than who they are. They're unashamedly the way that they are. And so, They used to say, they used to not say the quiet part out loud. They do, and they don't care now. In this era, we're not paying for poor kids to go to school. We want to fund vouchers for privates, and we want to do charters so all of our friends can make millions. And they just say that out loud. Uh, it's about the money. It's not about an education. It's about the money. And who's not sitting next to my child in school? And so they're unabashedly who they are. You need to understand that. But now you start trying to move money around, they'll come down full force on you. The legislature will. Your hide won't hold shucks because they intend for it not to be moved. So that's what Leandro, and it filters down to the school level. They intend for you not to move not one penny of money, that you shouldn't be able to do anything to help anybody. So don't be having any, don't think you're hurting the team here. Follow the financial laws and rules. I don't care what a good idea you think it is, or have humanitarian, or what benefit. Don't. You will not. So let's look right quick. I had it pulled. Let me see. I can find it.
Dr. Lamb, I have a question right quick.
Yeah.
With the funding piece, is that where the magnet schools started becoming more, I mean, I guess, relevant, or there's becoming more magnet schools within districts?
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of magnet schools was to try to stop white flight from public schools.
Uh-huh.
Basically, to have private schools paid for with public money so that all the wealthy white people wouldn't leave. That's what magnet schools are for. Um, and it wasn't about inequity or any of that. It was these parents want something better, and if we don't give it to them, they'll leave. So we segregated and called them magnet schools. My wife taught at one for 15 years. You know, I mean, that you know, there's value in them, but now it's because you're putting all your best and brightest together. But the whole notion of magnet schools is to keep white people from leaving public schools. Right here. All right. So this one was, she resigned, proved her resignation. This was April 16th, 2020. Charged with focusing on our traditionally underserved students. She was trying to close the opportunity gap. Baldwin school system came under criticism from the community in February. That'd be the Chapel Hill, not the Carrboro side. After documents revealed the district was involved in a contract not publicly approved by the school board. Emails between Assistant Superintendent of Business and Finance and consulting company Education Element bill more than $250,000 of payments. And they were structured so that it would prevent a school board wouldn't have to approve it. That's what we're talking about here. She was trying to get some more help. They'd already spent $250,000 before they found out, but she was obligated to spend another $750,000, a little over $1 million. 12 payments of $80,000 plus an initial down payment of the same. So a little over $1 million. But right here it is. They fired the CFO. Yep. And you can read more about it, but this is the one right here. But again, she was trying to circumvent Leandro, and one of the from the wealthy side of town, they saw what was going on and knew the law, and she didn't last but a minute. And the CFO got charged criminally, by the way. So you got to be real careful on moving money around. You can't. You don't. You won't. Just like when you file your local budget, you got all your funding streams. And even if you're going to have a bake sale and a cakewalk, like when they tried to throw Rusty's bond that time, the church had a bake sale and a cakewalk. You got to tell what you're going to do with the money before you ever raise it. Yeah, you got to know. And you better spend it on that too. And if you're dumb enough to let parents raise money for you, oh my God, you don't deserve to be a school administrator if you're that dumb. You're responsible for what they do or don't do as well. Better know that. I would never let parents get anywhere near a fundraiser or the money, ever. Because you're responsible for it. So you better know that. All right.
So when the budget wise, every year a school gets audited with their finances as well. That's
Every
sent
spring.
to the office in the zone. And then is that shared to the public?
Oh yeah. Remember, your budget is a public document. If you're a public school, somebody wants to see your audit, absolutely. When you call me and say, when you're an assistant principal and you call me and say, I'm interviewing for a principal job, and when you call or email me and say, hey, I got the job, first thing I'm going to tell you is, first day you're there, request an audit. I don't care if they just had one in the spring. I don't care. Your first official act should be to request from the superintendent or the finance officer an audit of the books, so you'll know what's there and not there. It's amazing how creative things get, or how much, or how bad things can get out of control over 2 or 3 months' time, especially in a high school. When I became principal at Olympic High School, I walked in, we were about $250,000 in debt. Yep. And you say, how in the world? Well, we had a scholarship. We had a scholarship fund. We were funding 3 college scholarships with substantial money. They had shifted it from savings into checking to make it look like we had more money. That was the first thing that had happened. The former principal, that's why I was there. The former principal had done that. They had taken it out of the savings account and shifted it to the checking, so that the balance of that would show. So in actuality, we were about 60,000 actually real money in the hole. So as soon as I moved that back to the savings that generate the interest for those 3 scholarships, you know, we were in trouble, about $60,000 in trouble. And how do you get $60,000 in debt from when the audit in March? Well, you don't pay for the prom. You rent the Sheraton over at the airport for the prom. You spend $20,000 on that. You don't pay Jostens for the yearbook. That's another $20,000. And you don't pay Pepsi Cola your semi-annual for all of your vending and products for your spring athletics. You don't pay the Pepsi Cola bill. That's how you be $60,000 in debt when you walk in the door. But I called for the audit the first day and I knew what I had to do. So, you know, I'm not proud. I took a janitor's closet upstairs on the second floor, cleaned it out, and made a candy room. And I started, and just like the Godfather, I got a cut. Everybody wanted to sell candy. They had to buy it from me, 10%. I made 10% on everything they sold, every club, every group, all year long. We sold candy 52 weeks out of the year. In less than a year, I had us out of the hole. I'm not proud. Absolutely. Absolutely. We had the candy room. Godfather, I get 10% up off the top to pay the bills. We owed $60,000. That's how that goes. So yeah, that's exactly what we did. Now I told them not to sell it till after lunch. Now if they did or they didn't, I wasn't watching. You know, if you sell before lunch, you get in trouble with child nutrition. That's federal. You got to be careful about that. And so the good thing about being an early start high school, lunch was so early. We were done with lunch by 1 o'clock. That's just about the time kids start getting hungry. They'd buy a big bunch before they got on the bus at 2:15. And so, man, we cleaned up in the afternoon and turned them drink machines back on. And we'd stand there and sell them candy bars and had the drink machines on. We clean up every afternoon. Doesn't work if you got to have an early start high school for that to work really well, though. And so, but yeah, it worked really well. But yes, you got to track your money. All right, let's talk about the skip. Before I go to skip, I got a couple really, really good PowerPoints. I didn't make them, so that's why I can say they're really good. Dr. Griffin Jordan made one, and Dr. Sane made the other. Let's look at them right quick. On cyberbullying, I don't like to read them. Right here, Josh Sane made this one on technology, social media, and cyberbullying issues. Really good one. Really good one. On bullying, Dr. Griffin Jordan made this one. It's got some really good North Carolina scenarios of things that happened that we're talking about here. So these are under this week. So these are two really good ones. I highly recommend. They're only about 10 minutes, 15 apiece. You should watch those. I'm gonna put links to these two on Leandro. Let's see. There's a really good primer on how to develop your school-wide bullying prevention plan. You know you're required to do a bullying prevention plan. Every school is, North and South Carolina. It's only 16 slides long, and it goes through, it tells the effects and all that. But right here, it's kind of a checklist of things that you should have it in your plan. What can schools do? Right here's best practices. It's kind of bulleted. These are the things that you should address in your plan. This is how to build your plan right here. So when you get to be AP and you get put in charge of developing this year's bullying prevention initiative, right here's a wonderful PowerPoint that you can download and keep, and it's got all the bullets that you need right down the line to make sure that they're in your plan. It's, again, under this week's lesson. And again, remembering that bullying, cyberbullying, social media, it starts little and ends big, just like the young lady that killed herself, the suicide. Or, the little things become the big things. If you don't handle them, the little things become the big things. Remember, it's called antecedent behaviors. The little things become the big things. And these are the prevalent kind of things. I even knew it 13 years ago. No smarter than I am. That this was the coming. This is what the new world was going to look like, and going forward. So the little things become the big things. All right, let's talk about our skip. So here's where everybody goes wrong. They want to make it harder than it is. It's not about academics, folks. So when it says you do a needs assessment to determine the gaps in communication between the external and internal communities, that's the school and the parents, that's exactly what the needs assessment is for. You're only looking at gaps. And so you look at your teacher working conditions survey at the parent community involvement section. And those of you in South Carolina, look at your parent survey for communication with the school. You're looking for gaps in communication. A clear statement of the purpose. All you got to say is looking for gaps in communication. Now, the other part where we go wrong is that last bullet down there. And I'm going to spend some time on that one. Short-term are your short-term goals need to be things that are communication-based. I'm going to work on a phone tree, an email tree, a Twitter club, a WhatsApp group, or whatever. The whole notion is we got to go out and hook those parents. We got to start communicating. We got to get in their social media circle. We got to be one of the places they check every day, like Facebook or the numbers from the lottery. We got to be in their social orbit every day. And once we've got them hooked, that's the short-term goals. Then we're going to do our long-term goal. Our long-term goal is going to be something that an event that we're going to have at our school. That basically says to parents, without really saying this, but this is what we're saying to them. Let us help you help your child. Family math night, family reading night, family EOG night, family EOC night. We want to get parents in for something other than a talent show or a ball game where we're doing something that family college scholarship night, college fair night. So my example, so again, remember, short term is about communication, doing something with social media, some way that you're in touch with these parents. That's your short term goal. Long term is having an event at your school that you get parents to come. Family math night, you're providing them manipulatives where they can sit and work with their kids at home, or reading materials they can sit and do lap time and read the kids at home or something like that. You know, family EOG night, best strategies for helping your kids study for the test. That kind of thing. Now, if you don't do the communication piece, it doesn't matter how good your event's going to be. If you miss the communication piece to start with, the short term, the long term won't be any good. So my example is this. So I had Dr. Wendy and Jonathan and Lisa. They were, and one more, and I can't remember, but those were the three main ones. They did the skip at Parkland High School in Winston-Salem. They had recently undergone a pupil assignment shift, and they had gotten a large Hispanic population. And they planned this wonderful, wonderful event. They had it at 7:00 at night, and we had 4 people show up. Not 4 families, we had 4 people. But it was a mom and a daddy and a child and Reverend Jose. He was the local pastor of the local Hispanic church. Reverend Jose came. But miracle of all miracles, Reverend Jose talked to him. What went wrong? He said, well, first of all, he said, you had it too late. What do you mean? The buses? He said, well, the buses will bring the parents out to school, but they'll stop running before it's over with, and they can't get home. And we worked with Reverend Jose, got the word out through the church and the community, got in social media. We had a second one. We ran it again. Any football coaches in the crowd, run it again. How many think we had the second time? Now we listened and we were communicating, and we listened to Reverend Jose. We had 4 again, so we had 400 this time. We had 400. The principal was just flabbergasted. Turned their school around. I was a local hero. Who would have thunk it? It was the students who did the work. It wasn't me. But it was marvelous. It's the example. If you don't do the short term, if you don't hook them, if you're not in their social orbit, it doesn't matter how good your event is. Now, second example, not far away in Guilford County, Northwest Guilford High School, Ralph Kitley's the principal there. Ralph's a peer of mine, known Ralph a long time. He's younger than me, but I've known him. He played at Duke. I don't hold that against him. Ralph's a 7-footer. His daughter is the center, the 6'6", 6'7" girl that plays center for Virginia Tech. That's Ralph's daughter. Ralph was principal at Northwest Guilford. Nice suburban high school north of Greensboro. I had two interns specifically work on this. I had 6 there at one time, but 2 that worked on this one specifically were Diana Birdsey and Keisha Sinclair. And they did family college night, family college fair night. They partnered with Novant. Novant had a nice luncheon. I got to put on a suit and go, got to eat for free. It's long right. Well, it's only 90 minutes from my house to Greensboro. But so went up there, and what they did was they set the gym up. They had tables, and they had all these occupations in health services, Novant, and they had the colleges there. But on every table, they had a card that said, this is the kind of job you get. This is how much money it pays. This is the college degree you need, and these are the advanced courses you need to take in high school. This was back when, you took advanced in 9th and 10th and AP and 11th and 12th. But we ran it at night. We had the parents of the freshmen come in. Everybody in the freshman class, them and their parents came. We got the word out. We got them all there. And I mean, they turned out in droves. About 95% of the kids and parents in the 9th grade at Northwest Guilford showed up for that thing. That we had it at night, so the parents could come. Within 2 years, They had the highest percentage of kids taking advanced and AP courses in any high school in the state of North Carolina. You think it changed their fortunes? You think it turned that school around? It was a good school, but then all of a sudden it became a great school. That's what we're talking about here, folks. And I don't know if we'll ever have see that kind of impact ever again, but who knows? You know, largest journey starts with the first step. So the whole notion of the skip is hook them with a short-term communication, find out where your gaps are, look at your TWC, look at your parent survey in South Carolina. Got examples in there for you. Hook them. And then in task 2, you do your partial. You do your partial. This is for task 2 right here. This one's for task 2. This one's for task 3. The full one is the full marketing plan. Now remember, you know how it goes. Specific activity, when you're going to do it, who's going to be responsible. I don't want staff or teachers. I want somebody's name. Resources needed and fiscal, that's money. And then resources needed, how many people are going to need to do this. And then when you do your full one in task 3, we add the formative and summative goal and indicator of success. Let me run through those for you again. Your summative assessment, your formative is a fidelity check. How are we going to know that if this is happening or not? This is of the adults who work in the building. How do we know that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing to make this happen? Summative assessment method is if we actually pull it off. We actually have the event. The goal, have 100 parents there. Indicator of success, you know, first time out, maybe 50. You understand how this works. So that's task 2 and task 3. Task 2 is figure out your resources needed, fill that out. Task 3 is put it all together. Task 4 is to write the remaining competencies you didn't do during the OMA. It's just as quick, just as fast, just as easy. What would be great if you spent the time actually doing an event like Diana and Keisha did at Northwest Guilford, or like Dr. Wendy Jonathan and Lisa Bohr did at Parkland. It doesn't take long to write this up, but they actually went out and did it. They actually went out and did it while we were in class. I went and saw both of them in action. Again, not far from the house. I went and watched, and it was great. Both of them were great. I've seen some others, but those 2 stick out in my mind in that, you know, if you don't do the communication piece, it doesn't matter how good your program is. And your program has got, you know, you got to get the program to the right people. And they did. They eventually got it right. Both of those got it right. All right, I can close that one now. Let's see. So again, you see how it goes right down now. The only other thing is make sure you read carefully. There's 2 prompts for task 1. You simply go to the teacher working conditions survey or your teacher survey in South Carolina, and you pull up your school leadership section. See if there's any weaknesses there and make a recommendation if you see anything. Now, again, school leadership, not teacher leadership. You'll be on the TWC, and then in South Carolina, go to your teacher survey. And that's pretty easy. It's right down the line, folks. This one is not hard. I'd love if you actually pull something off at your school. That would be great. It really would be great if you can, but it's not required. But if you can do it.
Dr. Lamb?
Yeah.
So when I talked to my principal about the teacher working conditions survey, and so it'll be given again in the
Don't worry about
spring.
it. Just get the 2002 ones.
Right. And he's looking forward to seeing it because this is his second year. So we had a different principal back then. So
yeah. And so again, when we get to the CAP later this semester, we're going to look at, in the TWC, we're going to look at time, facilities, and resources, teacher leadership, school leadership. We're going to look at those. You can see the different sections. But for the purposes of the skip, the one we're doing right now, the one that says school leadership right here is what that's task 1, prompt 2, you look at this one, see if there's any gaps, anything that that's in yellow or red. Got a couple of blues here, not too good. Might make a couple of suggestions there if this was your school. But this is the one you're going to look at to find gaps in communication right here. Parents and guardians are influential decision makers in the school. Ooh, only 50%. School maintains clear two-way communication. Now, if you want to do a focus group, if you want to do a survey, besides what the TWC tells you, that's fine, because just like Tanya just pointed out, it's been 2 years, so things might have changed at your school. Now, because of that, when we do the CAP, what we do is we have you resurvey. We have you pick the lowest items, 1 or 2, in those 5 sections, time, facilities, resources, teacher leadership, school leadership. We have you pick the lowest item or 2 and resurvey them, because it's been 2 years and things may have changed. And that makes principals a lot happier when we do that. That we just simply don't pull it. But for our purposes on this one, we're just going to pull this data. If you want to survey and see if it's still low, or that's fine with me, but you're not required. We do survey when we do the CAP. We say like for this one, the lowest one is parents and guardians are influential decision makers in the school. We would, on our survey that we sent back out to the teachers, we'd say, on the 2002 one, this was the lowest one. Is it still low, or were you just pissed off at that principal that day? Or is this reality? It's really this bad here. That's basically what we do. Now, you don't have to do that, but you can on the skip. You don't have to. And so those are the things that you use to put these together. You can read the task and the prompts just like I do, but I just wanted to highlight the areas where I normally have trouble. But trying to get y'all in the habit of fishing for yourself, trying to teach you how to fish here. All right, I see our time's up. More time flies when you're having fun. Questions you have for me? Everybody's got a clear idea of how easy the skip is, but what you got to do? Everybody understands, Leandro, that what you're looking at here is basically one state's way to avoid from paying for education for their least capable students. The irony being is, what is the purpose of public education? To educate the least capable students. You understand that, again, to get on my soapbox, that public education is not a constitutional right. It is provided for in the preamble to the Constitution. Is provided that states may provide it for their least capable students. It's a way out. And that's kind of one of the things when Jeffrey asked about magnet schools. I mean, magnet schools don't fit the whole notion of what public schools are for. I mean, there were private schools in this country before there was this country. Harvard's older than the United States. Wealthy people have always had access to education. The whole notion of public schools is to make sure that the least of us had access and a way to try to get out of their circumstance. And that's completely antithesis of magnet schools, which is basically creating these elite academies for people so they won't leave. Let them leave. And let public education be what public education is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a hand up, not a foot down on somebody's throat like it's become. But, unfortunately, in modern times, we have a political party who believes if we educate people, they won't vote for us. Well, that's probably true. So they have a vested interest in not educating people, because educated people won't vote for them. So public schools are in a quandary right now, but let's not forget what they're for, and who we should be looking after in the process. But that's enough editorializing for one night. All right, I'm going to put the links to these two Leandros so you can read a little about them. And you can Google Leandro and do as much as you want to read and get down into West Ed, the private group that came in and said no. The state's not giving the money they promised they would to these low wealth districts. But anybody who understood, as I did 30 years ago, when you lost the lawsuit, which would have forced a change in the funding formula that if it was left up to politicians, that it would never happen, and it did. So now it's a political thing, not a legal thing. But I'll put those two links in under tonight's lesson and under lesson 6. All right. I will see you all next week. I appreciate you. Everybody have a good week. Keep turning that work in. I like reading it.